Okay. Good afternoon and welcome everybody, guys. Sorry, there's some trades happening in the background. US30 is in the perfect position for a buy. So you'll see if you are Premium Plus copy trade clients, we are in some early positions. I would like to have waited just prior to Powell speaking, but there's a ton busy happening. So listen, I haven't been with you guys live in a while. I'm super excited to be with you guys again. Almost forgot how to do these live events, right? So if you're with us right now, please drop a comment, let us know. We are running some new equipment, so let me know how the audio is. Everything sounds clear. Just let me know. Love to hear your guys' feedback. So what's happening in the world? A lot, right? We had a difficult day on Monday. We recovered Tuesday. We moved back into profits today. And we have Powell testifying today. So really this testifying is two parts, right? We'll get into today's part and tomorrow's part. But really it comes down to where we are in the world from an inflation perspective, from interest rates. Now, again, if you're part of our new community, if you're part of some of the new clients who have joined us and don't really understand enough about trading right now, don't let this overwhelm you. We're just going to get into a little bit of details. Now, if you've been referred by one of our amazing partners across the world, we've got Megan, we've got Vaynant, we've got Anthony. These are all partners to DVDM Markets. Being referred to them if they've asked you to jump into this live broadcast, and you like what you see and you like to take part in our free community in any one of our communities, they just ask them how to get in, how to get involved. I just want to do something really quickly. I'm not sure if this is going to cut my streaming software, but I'm just going to close some quick profit there on the copy trade. So if you have a look at your copy trade again, we've closed off another small, right? So let's jump into it, right? What is happening in the world? What is this all about? Okay, so we have Powell speaking today, right? And this is pretty much in two parts. So if you guys have a look at behind me, here is pretty much the positions we are trying to take advantage of on copy trade. You'll see we've opened and closed quite a few little positions here. We've scalped out a few percent here at the bottom. I wanted to get in just before the live show kicked in, but we pushed a little bit further down, which I'm happy with. But it speaks about the bigger picture of where US30 is. Now, why would I be looking at bullish US30? Why were we looking at bullish gold positions, right? It speaks to where the market is right now and what's busy happening in the world as we speak. So what is happening? How do we break this down? Very, very simply put, right? If you've been with us and been following our live shows for the past little bit, you'll know that we've been speaking a ton about inflation. We've been speaking about, interest rates, inflation. So let's just take a step back. Let's just dumb it down, right? If you're brand new and joining us the first time, I would love for you all just to comment, tell me where in the world you're joining us from. If you're new to trading, if you're an existing trader, if you're a ninja in the markets or the markets is ninjaing you and your account, just let us know, right? We'd love to hear from you. It also tells me how deep I have to go. So let's just break this down. COVID happened. The whole world said, oh no, what's going on? And most countries around the world tried to do whatever they can to contain the situation, right? Keeping people at home, etc. But when you do this, the economy stalls. So what they do is they stimulate the economy. If you remember in the US, they were giving away stimulus checks and unemployment benefits to those that were sticking at home. And they started to inject a whole bunch of money into the economy. Now, at the same time, they reduce interest rates across the board to make acquiring cheap money easy, right? This is when they reduce interest rates. It's easier to go to the bank and get a loan at a lower interest rate. It's easier to pay off. So they stimulate the economy artificially. So what happens is COVID happened. We sort of started to pass through it. And as we got to the other side, now the economy is red hot. There's a bunch of money put into the system. They're printing money. This is called quantitative easing. Printing money, putting it into the economy. It gets stimulated. Things are starting to get back on track. Now, the question may be, well, why don't they just do this all the time, every time? The problem when you do this, when you add new money into the economy, this is where you get inflation, where $1 today buys less and less tomorrow. This is inflation. Hyperinflation would be an example of what happened in Zim, right? Just as an example, where $1 turns to 10, turns to 100. Eventually, you can't buy a loaf of bread for $1 million Zim dollar, 100 million Zim dollar, whatever the case may be. So what economies and countries do at this point is they start to raise interest rates again, right? They start to tighten down on these mechanisms that they put money into the economy. They raise interest rates to make acquiring capital a little bit more difficult. They, start quantitative, instead of quantitative tightening, they go to quantitative easing. right? Quantitative tightening. So they start to just stop injecting all this money into the economy. They start to sell back some of the assets that they initially bought to stimulate. Now, what this does, though, if they don't have this balance right, if they tighten the economy too hard and too fast, this is what causes a recession, right? Where they starve the economy, people can't get jobs, unemployment starts to raise, gross domestic product starts to fall. You see all these other things, right? So they don't get inflation down and they starve the economy. So where we are right now and why this moment is so important, if you guys have been with us for a while and we've looked at these past studies, you'll see that when interest rates are raised, right? When interest rates are raised, this is essentially good for the dollar. The dollar benefits from this because as an attractive investment, the rest of the world looks at the dollar and says, oh, wow, this is attractive, right? It's government-backed securities. Let's put money there. At the same time, when interest rates are raised, people take money out of the stock market. They take money out of certain areas and they put it back into government-backed securities. Because remember, it's time of uncertainty. What do we do with our money? I don't know. Put it with the government. Okay. So those two things happen. And what they do is they strengthen the dollar. So just remember this, interest rates raise, dollar gets strong. As we've seen in past studies, when interest rates start to come down, right, this is a sign to investors that, hey, right, we're on the other side of this issue, recession, pandemic, whatever the case may be, we're on the other side of it, and normal growth, natural growth will start to take place, right? And this is now what investors start to look at, and this is what basically stimulates the economy again. I just want to check markets in the background as we have a look there. So we're already in profit. We got a little bit of a spike there. So if you're on copy trade, we are already inside a little bit of a profitable spike. We're going to hold this, right? So what I'm going to do across the board, if we're having a look at copy trade, is I'd like to move stop loss to entry. I'm going to give that a little bit of a look-see and see if we can afford to do that prior to the speech, or we may end up just closing out or holding it. I'd love to close it. I think for safety's sake, we're going to close it out. We've banked some good profit already for the day. Nice in and out. We've scalped like ninjas. We are good to go. So if you have a look at your copy trade, you can go have a look at your phone right now. If you are a Premium Plus client, that will be closed out, and you know what time it is. Time to bring Trump out to do his thing. So if you're a Premium Plus client, we have not lost a single trade for the day, and we've just absolutely smashed across the board. Now, again, it's just going to keep getting better and better. We keep adding technology, systems, and teams to the process. So if you want to be a copy trade client, you keep 100% of your profit. There's no split. You're welcome to join us. Anyways, back to the show, right? In terms of where we are now, what does this all mean? Interest rates have been paused, right? Now, the Federal Reserve for the US, and Powell, who's the chairman of the Fed, probably the single most powerful person in finance in the world, more than the president of most countries. He controls so much and ripple effects around the world. And that's why we listen to, we study, and we attend these speeches. Don't let someone trick you about Instagram trading. Instagram trading is not about NFP, go all in, renting Ferraris, and if you blow everybody's account. That's not trading, guys. That's some other bullshit. I don't know what you call that. That's not trading. Trading is about understanding the market. It's about technical analysis, about spending time understanding the fundamentals, these events, and what moves in the markets. This is what trading is about. And this is something that anyone can learn. And you will learn this as the part and process of growing and understanding the markets. Anyway, I just had to vent about these idiots online. So interest rates have come to a pause. Now, the big discussion right now is when will the Fed start to reduce interest rates, right? The big thing here, and what majority of the consensus is right now, and we heard from Powell in January, right? A large percent of the market believed that interest rates could start to be reduced in March, where we are right now. Powell dismissed that in January, saying a March rate cut or rate reduction seems premature. They would prefer to keep things higher and longer to have a look at where the economy goes, right? As you guys know, previous NFP, right? There was a very red hot, the jobs report came out massively, 350,000 new jobs were created. That wasn't an expectation, right? There wasn't an expectation the economy that red hot. So basically, what we are here today to listen to is, has the Fed or has Powell and his partners pivoted from this understanding that, hey, everything's on track, we're good to go. Now, there's two key things here. If Powell is aggressive and what we call hawkish and very like, we will do whatever it takes and this needs to have action, and if he's like hammering down on the gloom and doom of how important it is to to keep rates high for longer, this will be seen as bad for the dollar, right? If he's all gloom and doom and he wants to keep rates high for longer, this will be good for the dollar. If he's more dovish and optimistic and saying, hey, yeah, everything's pointing in the right direction. Yes, we had higher jobs report. Yes, we've had this, but it all is working in line with the things that we're putting in place. If he's dovish and loving and caring towards this whole situation, that is going to be bad for the dollar. It tells investors it's very likely we're going to start to potentially see a rate cut in June or July of this year. If we see a rate cut, guys, dollar's going to hit the floor. Assets, commodities, stocks, indices are going to shoot through the roof. And that's what we're looking for as traders. That's where we want to be. Listen, by the way, if you're a copy trade client, please go ahead and do me a favor. Take a screenshot of your results just for today, even tomorrow. I think we won most of our trades yesterday as well. Send me a screenshot of that. I'm going to give one lucky person. Whoever sends me that screenshot, I'm going to give you $100 right here, right now. So not only are you a copy trade client, not only are you printing money, we're going to go ahead and send you $100. I think it's about 2,000 Rand. So go ahead and send me those screenshots. Aren't you sad you aren't a copy trade client already, right? Okay, so that's the big discussion. That's what we're here to see, right? Now, again, I'm bringing Trump back because he's done his thing. We've obviously already had a great day in the markets, but we're going to see if we can make that even better. Just a quick snapshot of the CPI, right? This is the CPI that we saw interest rates, consumer price inflation data peaked, right? If we have a look at June last year, peaked, right? And again, they wanted to get that inflation data closer to the 2% mark, right? They are getting there. And we're starting to see much better data that is likely going to point us into that direction. Now, we should start to see the sort of thing come on in the background behind me here. This is basically, Powell that's going to be addressing the Committee on Financial Services. And again, I mentioned there's a two-part meeting, right? In the sense that the first part is that he's addressing this particular session. The next part, he's addressing Senate, the bankers, etc. So again, what we're really waiting out for and what we're trying to listen to is where is Powell's position between the last meeting, which was January, and the next meeting coming up, right? While we're listening to this, I'm going to send you guys some of the screenshots from some of our copy trade clients from around the world. We currently have about 20 million currently sitting there being managed across the board. So you're not a copy trade client, make sure you become one. Again, all you need is Premium Plus. Premium Plus gets you access to live shows, signals. Our signals are absolute fire. Live shows like this, the cool full Quantum Growth Markets Academy. So if you don't know where to start, how to trade, what it's all about, our full academy is there. We teach you 8 hours, everything you need to know in the markets. And that's all part of Premium Plus, right? There's probably a bunch of the extras. I don't even know. There's so many extras. So if you invited you by one of our partners, whether it is Anthony, whether it is Garwin, whether it's Megan, whether it's Vaynant, go back to them and ask them, how do you get a part of that? And they'll help you with that process and get you set up. It's as easy as that. Less than $1 a day, absolutely smash it. Okay. So behind me, this is going to pop up at any time. Just want to go have a look at the markets just quickly while we're sitting there. And again, what we're looking for today is what is Powell's demeanor? What is he going to be sounding like? Is he going to be dovish? Is he going to be hawkish? And it'll give us a really good idea of where we're going to be sitting in the markets for the balance of this afternoon. And again, having a look at gold behind me, there's a one minute time frame. Obviously, we were taking some scalps around here this afternoon. We're basically looking at that push higher. We looked at that pullback this morning. We were looking at how do we get in long. We took some of those longs this morning, absolutely skyrocketed. We made some good money pretty early already for today, as well as US30. Now, I actually had this question by a client earlier this week, and Monday specifically, that I said, hey, listen, gold has really, really slapped them around, right? Can they not take gold? And I was literally saying on Monday, the reality about the markets, nobody has a glass ball. If we look at the team's combined experience, we've got something like 25 years under our belts in the market. And no matter how much experience you may or may not have in the markets, this is the reality of trading, right? Some days are going to be amazing. Some days aren't going to be that great, but that you stick to the process, stick to the rules. Now, the Quantum Growth Markets Academy will set you up with some of those rules, how to risk manage, how to do certain things, but you aren't going to have all days as winners, right? Today, we haven't lost a single trade, but that's not an everyday type of thing. It's a fairly common occurrence, but it's not a guarantee, right? And the reality is just to stick to the process. You can have a bad day. You can have a bad week. Hopefully never a bad month. We've never had a bad month, but you want to make sure that on the other side of that bad day, bad week, that you have not decimated your account. If you can go through a difficult season and not wreck your accounts, decimate it to the point where you can't recover, you are further along than 99% of traders that are out there. Let me just tell you that much. Okay, just so you have a little bit of confidence in the process. There we go. I can see the comments there. I can see Anthony, another one of our leaders and partners, is in Cape Town. I can see IM is with us. I can see Tsaboho is Bramley, SA, the beautiful Miss Marsha Barton. I can see Vaynant in the house. Appreciate you guys. Okay, so we should be kicking off any second now, and that should kick off in the background. Any questions you guys may have for us, please drop it in the comments, right? If you want to know how to get started, you want to know anything like that, please drop it in the comments. We would love to help you, love to get you going in the right direction. Now, if you have not been referred by any one of our amazing partners for 2 and 4 DVDM markets, and the links you may need are also down below to get started, to get moving, to get into our social area for free. It's all parts and parcel of the progress of the process. For those of you who have never seen our social area, I'll actually bring it up for you. It's something else that just doesn't exist anywhere else in the markets right now. Everybody else has a Telegram group, right? That's about it. That's where it kind of stops and starts. We've gone ahead and we've created this whole extensive environment just for you, right? Meaning our live shows will be put here, right? So you'll be able to see when our live shows are happening, what is happening in those live shows. You'll be able to see leaderboards. You'll be able to go into the classroom, go and study. You can see the calendar when there's live events. You can go look at our different members. Everything is there for you, right? Everything's for you to go ahead and benefit from. Go ahead and chat, engage with us, etc. This is the free environment. We have a Premium Plus environment, which is a little bit more detailed. We are going to be cleaning this up as well in the coming days. Now, I can't yet see the comments. I can't tell if that's my system or not. Oh, there we go. Now I can see comments. There we go. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just leaving on the live broadcast because Powell could be speaking any minute, which he is. So actually, I'm just going to cut off there, and we're going to let Powell do his thing. There's going to be some other members of the committee speaking as well. So let's let them go.
I'll now recognize myself for 4 minutes to give an opening statement, and welcome back, Chair Powell. Since you last appeared before the committee in June of 2023, the conversation in Washington surrounding inflation has shifted significantly. To be clear, it's not because the inflationary fire has been extinguished. From the most recent data available, food costs are up 21% since President Biden took office. Energy costs are up nearly 32%. Shelter costs are up more than 19%. And you'll pay 37% more for a dozen eggs in America today. As you stated in January, people are still paying more for the basics of life, and the prices they're paying are still high. Families aren't happy about it, as you know, and as our colleagues know. But according to the Biden administration, many of my Democrat colleagues, they should be thrilled. In an attempt to score political points, many in Washington have decided the best strategy is to tell people what they're feeling isn't actually accurate. They claim Bidenomics has brought down costs, and their partisan so-called American Rescue Plan put our economy back on the right track. Of course, we know the opposite is true, since inflation skyrocketed soon after the American Rescue Plan was enacted, which was predicted by several former Obama administration economic officials. Instead of working to solve the underlying issues causing high prices, the administration has played the blame game, citing corporate greed and so-called shrinkflation. Some Democrats have even trained fire on you, Chair Powell, blaming interest rate hikes, which were necessitated by Democrat spending, for the high cost and brazenly calling you to make cuts prematurely. It's highly inappropriate for lawmakers to attempt to influence monetary policy. Chairman Powell, I have faith that you will not allow politics to cloud your judgment in the fight to tackle inflation. As I have always said, you're a steady hand, and I believe you are committed to the Federal Reserve's independence, as am I. Just as you have rejected the outside pressures of politically motivated agendas, I hope you will be just as attuned to the threats of politicization when the calling is coming from inside the House. Vice Chairman Michael Barr's so-called holistic review of capital requirements and the fatally flawed Basel III endgame proposal represent a concerning trend of partisan proposals taking priority over supervision. This has real-world impacts, as we saw 1 year ago this month when the supervision and regulation arm of the Fed was late catching up to the effects of the acceleration of interest rates on the banking system. Americans were understandably shaken by last year's banking turbulence. As we continue to monitor potential instability, including bank exposure to commercial real estate, it's critical that the Fed keep its eye on the ball. This does not include enacting new, far-reaching, and ultimately harmful regulatory policy, though. As you know, members on both sides of the aisle, on this committee and in Congress, have made clear that the Basel III endgame proposal would be catastrophic for families, communities, and small businesses. Regulators should withdraw it and start over. I think that's the proper course with something as deeply flawed as the current proposal. Additionally, given that other significant proposals would have to fit holistically together, regulators cannot simply proceed with them as separate modules or using a cut and paste approach. Most importantly, as the Basel III endgame proposal is discarded or altered, I strongly urge you and other regulators not to finalize the long-term debt proposal. Instead, Chairman Powell, I would encourage you to stick to the task at hand and follow the data. The stakes are way too high to put politics over sound policy. With that, I yield back, and I'll now recognize the ranking member of the full committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back, Chair Powell. While I am pleased by the progress the Fed and the Biden administration have made.
Hey guys, so sorry, let me just add something really quickly in the background. So there's going to be a bunch of politicians making their statements, right, first and foremost. So you're going to see a bunch of people. Now, this is a bit of a boring thing, right? Everyone's got a political agenda. Everybody's trying to prove what they've got to say is more important than anybody else. They're trying to seem like they're fighting for the people. You know, people's housing costs have gone up. A dozen eggs cost more. So outside of that BS, and it's not really, it's important, right? But again, they're doing this politics. They're showboating, say, hey, you know, our people are suffering, whatever the case may be. And they grill Powell over some of these economic decisions. So we listen to all of the showboating that's going to happen. And at the end of that, Powell gives a speech addressing many of these things and then gets to be questioned and answered by some of these people. But just take it with a bit of a pinch of salt because some of them are absolute bellends, right? So just listen to what they got to say, but just some of them are absolute snooze fest. I see Fire's in the house, Frank's in the house. Let me quickly see. I can see Anthony was in the house as well. Mark Lewis, Paul Forbes, Jean-Claude Sibiso, Shavir Vainant, Mark Lewis, Garwin, Nashil, Rian Van Eden, Rishmi. Welcome, guys. Let's get back to the snooze fest, and then we'll get into what Powell's got to say.
6 hearings on housing, on top of launching baseless impeachment efforts, censoring members, and pushing our government to the brink of multiple government shutdowns. It's clear that Republicans are too focused on drama and chaos to deliver anything for the American people. That's not how Democrats roll. When I was chair of the committee during the 116th and 117th Congress, not only did we hold 55 hearings on housing, but I and my fellow Democrats enacted 12 critical housing bills into law in the last Congress alone that helped stymie a tsunami of evictions, foreclosures, and homelessness, keeping millions of people stably housed during and after the pandemic. Unlike Republicans, we don't just talk about the issue. Democrats make law. As House Republicans continue to disappoint, committee Democrats are offering evidence-based solutions to keep a fair and affordable housing agenda at the top priority in Congress. That's why I and my Democratic colleagues reintroduce 3 groundbreaking bills to address the housing crisis and bring down inflation once and for all. This includes Housing Crisis Response Act, the Ending Homelessness Act, and the Down Payment Toward Equity Act. Together, these bills would create nearly 1.4 million affordable, accessible, and resilient homes, reduce housing costs in homelessness, and revive the American dream of home ownership for all. So, When my Republican colleagues are ready to get serious about our nation's economy and inflation, Democrats are ready to work with you to pass the bills into law. In fact, tomorrow at noon, I, committee Democrats, and more than 30 housing advocates will join together at a press conference to share just how important ending the affordable housing crisis is to the state of our union. And so I invite all of my Republican colleagues who say they care about this issue to come on and join us. I look forward to discussing this critical issue with Chair Powell today. And, Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
The chair recognizes Mr. Barr, Chairman of the Subcommittee on Financial Institutions and Monetary Policy, for 1 minute.
Welcome, Chairman Powell. Runaway inflation and increased interest rates still have Americans reeling. And while the rate of price increases have come down thanks to monetary tightening, the overall level of prices remain high. The toothpaste is out of the tube, and Americans, the average American family, still is paying about $15,000 more for the same goods and services that they were purchasing just 3 years ago before the Biden administration. So Americans have suffered years of eroding purchasing power in their paychecks. And while I'm pleased the Fed is resolved in getting inflation back under control, I'm not pleased by the numerous recent unjustified, politicized, and underanalyzed regulatory proposals. The Fed needs to withdraw and repropose the irredeemably flawed Basel III Endgame proposal, especially given that 97% of public comments across the ideological spectrum express disapproval of the proposal. Chair Powell, I urge you to listen to the American people, withdraw the Basel III Endgame proposal, and tell us today what the Fed's plans are moving forward. I yield.
The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Financial Institutions and Monetary Policy, Mr. Foster, for 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair Powell, for being here today. And I had a chance to actually read the monetary policy report from cover to cover thanks to an exceptionally long airport delay, again, going back home last weekend. And the feeling I got again and again is that things are fairly well recovered from COVID and getting back to normal, that we're in the range where ordinary monetary policy and fiscal policy will allow us to satisfy your dual mandate. Today, unemployment remains near historic lows. Core PCE inflation is down to 2.8% year over year compared to a peak of 5.6% in 2022, and the major stock indices are hovering around record highs. GDP growth continues to beat expectations, and the U.S. economy has added more than 14 million jobs since President Biden took office. The GDP itself is pretty much back on the trajectory that it would have been pre-COVID. U.S. manufacturers alone have added nearly 800,000 jobs, employing more workers now than any point since 2008. And so my lesson from that is that the fiscal response that we engaged in was appropriately tailored, and the soft landing is within sight. So thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Today we welcome the testimony of Jerome Powell, Chair of the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors. As you know, you'll be recognized for 5 minutes for a summary of an oral presentation of your testimony. Without objection, your written testimony will be made a part of the record. Chair Powell, we're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman McHenry, Ranking Member Waters, and other members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to present the Federal Reserve's semi-annual monetary policy report. The Federal Reserve remains squarely focused on our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. The economy has made considerable progress toward these objectives over the past year. While inflation remains above the FOMC's objective of 2%, it has eased substantially, and the slowing in inflation has occurred without a significant increase in unemployment. As labor market tightness has eased and progress on inflation has continued, the risks to achieving our employment and inflation goals have been moving in a better balance. Even so, the committee remains highly attentive to inflation risks and is acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship, especially on those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. The FOMC is strongly committed to returning inflation to its 2% objective. Restoring price stability is essential to achieve a sustained period of strong labor market conditions that benefit all. I will review the current economic situation before turning to monetary policy. Economic activity expanded at a strong pace over the past year. For 2023 as a whole, gross domestic product increased 3.1%, bolstered by solid consumer demand and improving supply conditions. Activity in the housing sector was subdued over the past year, largely reflecting high mortgage rates. High interest rates also appear to have been weighing on business fixed investment. The labor market remains relatively tight, but supply and demand conditions have continued to come into better balance. Since the middle of last year, payroll job gains have averaged 239,000 jobs per month, and the unemployment rate has remained near historical lows at 3.7%. Strong job creation has been accompanied by an increase in the supply of workers, particularly among individuals aged 25 to 54, and a continued strong pace of immigration. Job vacancies have declined and nominal wage growth has been easing. Although the jobs to workers gap has narrowed, labor demand still exceeds the supply of available workers. The strong labor market over the past 2 years has also helped to narrow long-standing disparities in employment and earnings across demographic groups. Inflation has eased notably over the past year, but remains above the FOMC's longer-run goal of 2%. Total personal consumption expenditures prices rose 2.4% over the 12 months ending in January. Excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.8%, a notable slowing from 2022 that was widespread across both goods and services prices. Long-term inflation expectations appear to have remained well anchored, as reflected by a broad range of surveys of households, businesses, and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. After significantly tightening the stance of monetary policy since early 2022, the FOMC has maintained the target range for the federal funds rate at 5.25% to 5.5% since its meeting last July. We've also continued to shrink our balance sheet at a brisk pace and in a predictable manner. A restrictive stance of monetary policy is putting downward pressure on economic activity and inflation. We believe that our policy rate is likely at its peak for this tightening cycle. If the economy evolves broadly as expected, it will likely be appropriate to begin dialing back policy restraint at some point this year. But the economic outlook is uncertain, and ongoing progress toward our 2% objective for inflation is not assured. Reducing policy restraint too soon or too much could result in a reversal of progress we've seen in inflation and ultimately require even tighter policy to get inflation back to 2%. At the same time, reducing policy restraint too late or too little could unduly weaken economic activity and employment. In considering any adjustments to the target range for the policy rate, we will carefully assess the incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. The committee does not expect that it will be appropriate to reduce the target range until it has gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2%. We remain committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal and to keeping longer-run inflation expectations well anchored. Restoring price stability is essential to set the stage for achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the longer run. To conclude, we understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Federal Reserve will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Powell. And I should have noted this at the outset.
Okay, so just to add in, now that's done. Now people are going to ask questions, right? Now, whatever you didn't clarify, rate cuts, when is it going to happen, how soon it is going to be, etc. They're going to try and extract that out of him now, right? So this is important to listen to. I didn't get super dovish. I didn't get super hawkish. I got more dovish than anything else. Good for the markets, again. Good for gold long-term, indices long-term, etc. But we now need to listen for those nuances in the answers to the questions he's going to be getting. So this is important. Let's listen in.
And interest rates. We're in a political year, and the lens of a political year falls heavily on
Sorry, I'm not even sure if everyone...
parts of government.
Apologies, guys. I didn't mute the one and not the other. So again, he's going to get a bunch of questions now. The nuances in those questions we need to dissect, right? I feel his tone was generally dovish, generally good for the markets, bad for the dollar. But again, the details are going to lie into the little details he's going to give away. They're going to press him for rate cuts, etc., which is what the question that's happening here behind me. So let's listen.
I say that really it will depend on the path of the economy. Our focus is on maximum employment and price stability, and and the incoming data as they affect the outlook, and those are the things we'll be looking at. I can go further if you'd like.
So at what point will the Fed be forced to cut rates? What does the data, what kind of data would you point to, and do you have any updates there?
What we've said is that the committee would like to see more data that confirm and make us more confident that inflation is moving sustainably down to 2%. We have some confidence of that. Inflation, headline inflation has moved down more than 3 full percentage points now to 2.4%, as I mentioned in my remarks. We want to see a little bit more data so that we can become confident and so that we can take that step of beginning to reduce policy rates. It's a very important step. We think because of the strength in the economy and the strength in the labor market and the progress we've made, we can approach that step carefully and thoughtfully and with greater confidence. And when we reach that confidence, the expectation is we will do so sometime this year. We can then begin dialing back the restriction on our policy.
Well, let's pivot to regulatory policy. Chair Powell, as you know, there have been serious concerns expressed on both sides of the aisle and across America and across industries about the Basel III endgame proposal that Vice Chair Michael Barr has proposed and that the Fed is taking up. The concern is on both process, meaning how the proposed rule was developed, analyzed, and released for comment, the general concern of a lack of economic justification for these actions, but also on the substance. The proposal goes much further than the Basel III committee recommended on capital requirements, putting us at a great disadvantage internationally, potentially. So my first question is on substance. Is the Fed listening to these comments that have been nearly unanimous in opposition to this rule? Is the Fed listening to these comments on the impact the rule will have on everyday Americans? And what is the status on rulemaking, and what is the plan moving forward?
So you're right. We've received voluminous and very substantive comments, as well as the quantitative impact study that we put out. We got those responses in mid-January, and we're carefully analyzing them. We had asked for very specific, detailed, data-based comments, and I'm happy to say that we did get that. So we're just now reaching the stage where we can begin to make decisions about how to proceed. We really haven't made any decisions yet, but I think I can say a few things. First, we do hear the concerns, and I do expect that there will be broad and material changes to the proposal. I'll add that I'm confident that the final product will be one that does have broad support both at the Fed and in the broader world. As far as process is concerned, we're really not at the stage of making decisions about that. That's down the road at least a bit. I will say the question we get is reproposal, and I will say that we haven't made that decision, but if when we get to that point that turns out to be the appropriate thing, we won't hesitate to do it.
You won't rule that out? You would not rule that out at this stage of the game, reproposal?
Not at all. No, I think it's a very plausible option. It will depend on how things lie at the time when we reach that point.
Okay. And there's a lot of concern about the interplay between different parts of the rule, and if you change one, what does economic analysis look like for the new proposal? So it is good to hear that you'll be methodical and the Fed will do its traditional role of building consensus around the substantive changes, and that is your intention.
That is right. I said this would be a thoughtful, deliberative process. It's more important that we get this right than that we do it fast. We understand that. This is an important rulemaking, and it's going to have potential implications for the economy and the people we serve. We're going to take our time and do it right.
Thank you, Chairman Powell. The ranking member, Ms. Waters, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Chair Powell, I want to talk to you about housing, but before I get there, let me address the issue of mergers. Last week, I led a letter along with 15 committee Democrats to you as well as DOJ, OCC, and FDIC, expressing my strong concern about the lack of progress you have made in updating your bank merger review procedures. This is critical now that we just learned of another mega merger involving Capital One and Discover, which would create the sixth largest U.S. commercial bank with a major role in the credit card market. For far too long, experts have raised alarm that there is a rubber stamping process of bank mergers where virtually all applications are approved. All the while, unbridled market consolidation poses great risk to consumers and entrepreneurs. What is the status of your updates to the merger review process? And does the Fed plan to convene public hearings on the Capital One and Discover merger?
So I think, I believe we're in regular contact with the Justice Department on what's going on with their review of merger practices. We're looking at that and considering. I think on the potential merger with that you mentioned, we haven't received an application, so there's really not much to say yet. It's early days. When we do get that application, though, we're going to evaluate that merger as always under the factors laid out under the law, and that's our commitment.
So you do believe that your bank merger procedures are ready to do the work that's necessary when you evaluate this possible merger?
I do.
And are you supportive of organizing community hearings on this merger?
We haven't even, I haven't talked about that with anybody. I will say this, we've done that in many large mergers, but that's not a conversation we've had yet. We literally don't even have an application for the merger yet.
Thank you. We'll stay in touch with you on that. So turning to the national affordable housing and homelessness crisis, where we've seen steady increases year after year in home prices and rent costs, which are a symptom of the chronic undersupply of affordable housing. Indeed, more renters and homeowners are now spending more of their income than ever on housing costs. And as you know, housing costs continue to be a primary driver of inflation. Do you think the Fed has sufficiently emphasized the role that housing costs play in keeping us from your 2% inflation goal? Do you think it's reasonable to believe that monetary policy can accomplish this goal without a fiscal policy response? And if you do, how long will it take to get there?
Housing services inflation is one of the three components that we look at that make up the core PCE and, index, and it has been coming down from its heights of a couple of years back. It's part of the story. I think the overall story is that goods price inflation has turned negative. Goods prices are actually coming down a bit. Housing services inflation, you can see from currently entered into leases that as leases turn over, the increases are going to be smaller. So in our forecast and in everyone's forecast, housing services inflation comes down.
It's been reported that the methodology used to assess housing costs as an indicator of inflation is imperfect, namely because it considers costs based on both new and old rent, including for owner-occupied housing on a month-to-month basis. This results in stale data since families' housing costs typically do not change unless they move or their lease is up for renewal. So to address these imperfections in the housing cost indicators, the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Cleveland Fed created an improved methodology based solely on new lease rents, which is referred to as new tenant repeat rent index. Has the Fed incorporated this new indicator into its economic assessments? If not, why not? And so what changes has it had on the level of housing inflation observed by the Fed?
So we're well aware of that, and we do incorporate it into our thinking. As I was starting to mention, that is the reason, the fact that market rents are moving up at a much slower pace is the reason why forecasts are for housing services inflation to come down, and that absolutely plays a role in our thinking.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The Vice Chair, Mr. Barr, is, I'm sorry.
Wrong Vice Chair.
Wrong Vice Chair. The gentleman from Arkansas, the Vice Chair of the full committee, Mr. Hill, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to welcome you, Chairman Powell, to the committee. We're glad to have you back and your expertise. And I want to pick up where Chairman McHenry left off on his conversation about Basel III endgame. You made a good point saying you're not taking the whole concept of reproposal off the table as you review the analytics, and you all discuss the interactivity of that rule with other rules. So if you were to repropose the Basel III endgame, would the Federal Reserve delay then the long-term debt proposal that's on the table? In other words, would you agree that the agency should not finalize this long-term debt proposal for bank holding companies until banks have a better understanding of what their capital obligations under Basel III endgame might be?
So we haven't made the first decision yet, so it's hard, I couldn't say definitively. But yeah, that's a question we'd be asking ourselves is what would be the implication for other rules, including the long-term debt?
Well, and is the Fed considering changes to the requirement for regional banks to issue long-term debt? Right now, it's stated to be issued at 6% of risk-weighted assets, in abundance of caution in case there needs to be a resolution, obviously. We know the logic for it. But as I understand it, it's being required at both the holding company level and down at the bank level, and that seems redundant to me. Are you aware of that, and have you considered changing that in your discussions?
Yeah, so that's another area where the comment period ended a little while back, and so once again, we're in the process of evaluating the comments. There will be a thoughtful, deliberative process around that. We welcome comments on these kinds of things. They're very important implications for the banks that are affected. We want to understand the effects, make sure we understand them correctly so that we can evaluate, what a final rule should look like.
Good. Let me turn to the monetary policy outlook. As the chairman noted, consumer prices are 17% higher for American households since President Biden was inaugurated back in January of 21. And yet, in spite of that 17% increase in cost, real wages have actually fallen 2% over that period. So there's no doubt that inflation is the biggest issue facing American households, and in my view, there's three principal causing. Certainly, we had supply disruptions, but we've had unprecedented fiscal policy laxity. You described it in a recent interview as unsustainable, but we also think that the Federal Reserve, in my view, and many people on this committee commented, should have reduced accommodation after the pandemic sooner. One of the things coincident with that, which is what I want to talk to you about, is that the FOMC announced in August of 2020 this flexible average inflation targeting framework right in the middle of the pandemic, which many of us didn't understand why the Fed would take that decision then, but it would give you flexibility on the 2%, saying the Fed could allow inflation to rise above 2% and stay there above that level for some time because the Fed had had such challenges in getting the price level to 2%. That was a major shift in the Fed's approach. Do you think, in retrospect of now what we've witnessed over the past 4 years, that that was a mistake in hindsight to change that framework, and is it under review?
So we said we would do a review on a 5-year basis, and that means we'll be starting that review toward the end of this year. So we really haven't started. I do think that the question you raised will be one of the questions we look at, but the bigger question really is that change in the approach was really based on the fact that we'd had very low interest rates and very low inflation for a long period of time, and policy was always very close to the effective lower bound, so there wasn't any firepower for central banks, and so it was a way to keep inflation expectations anchored at 2% and not have them slide down. Now we have entered a different period. The pandemic really may have changed that in a sustained way. We don't know that yet, but that's the big question we'll be asking ourselves is the effective lower bound to be thought of in a different way now? And if it were, that would have ramifications for our framework. But we haven't begun the review yet. It'll begin at the end of this year and probably end late the next year.
Thank you. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. We'll now go to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Powell, for being here. And I think I want to pick up a little bit right where we are. 2019, 2020, the entire world was under the unprecedented pandemic with COVID rate. Is that correct?
Yes.
at the time. And that changed a lot of things with reference because not just for the United States, but for the entire world. And it affected the economies of countries just about on the planet. That's not also correct?
Yes.
And supply chains was disrupted. In fact, I can remember many Americans and people around the world could not get toilet paper or paper towels and some of the basics. And so the prices, because of the, of supply and demand, skyrocketed, causing the inflation, not only in the United States, but basically all over the world. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so therefore, the Fed had to do certain things because of what we were in at that particular time. We couldn't just go back and act like the pandemic wasn't there. We had to do something to try to make sure that we were able to get through the pandemic. Is that not correct?
Yes.
And now we're at that point where we're about to get through this pandemic. And we can look at the rest of the world, what they did or didn't do at that time, but what we did at that time. And as a result of that, 3 years post the pandemic, when you look around the world, I think that you were correct with what you stated, that by most accounts, our economy is doing well. In fact, I would say our economy is doing better than most of the other countries in the world. Would you say that's correct?
I would.
And so, I would say then that some of the other countries of the world maybe should have looked at the policies that we put in place thereafter so that they could get out of it, so that they could have a labor market that is strong, where the unemployment rate is near a 50-year low. And as you've stated, inflation is also now coming down faster than any place else on the planet just about. Is that not correct?
I think that's right, yeah.
And I think that you also recognize a mismatch between the strength of the economy, that's what we're talking about, in the field. And I think that Ranking Member Waters touched on one of those big issues of housing, of which is now, we're still trying to get that under control. And I think the Ranking Member has some ideas on how we can do that, and that may be something that you need to consider so that we can further get down the inflation rate. And the other would be the commodity markets, because the cost of food is too high in people. So that's something else that we need to get in control. Is that not correct?
Yes.
And let me just ask this. Can you say that there's a connection, for example, between conflicts in other areas of the world, like Russia's war against Ukraine and or the turmoil in the Middle East and the economic pressures that the United States feels? Does that not also go into the reason why the cost of commodities can be still higher? Is there a connection therein, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly the war in Ukraine caused commodity prices to move up sharply.
So could you tell you what is the, what would the connection lead you to believe that there is an urgent need for us, I would think, for, and we're running out of time, for us to do everything that is in our power in Congress to support Ukraine so that we can make sure that and other strategic partners, that we can help the commodities market, and that would help lower the cost of some of the commodities, bringing food prices down, if we would just be able to pass certain things that's going to help Ukraine right here in the United States Congress. Is that correct?
Here's where it gets outside of our jurisdiction. So I wouldn't have an opinion on Ukraine funding.
But if we had more grain that was going through, it wasn't blocked by Russia, things of that nature, that generally just, says that helps bring the cost down. Cost is higher because of the disruption in the Black Sea that's happened because of this war. So that would help bring the cost down. That is not necessarily the policies just here in the United States, but that's the policy because of what's going on in Russia, and we need to make sure that we do something to prevent that if we really are serious about bringing inflation down. Is that not correct?
I think it's correct that a full supply of grain would help with commodity prices.
And so, instead of us playing politics with this and acting like it is your fault or anyone else's fault that we had to go and do what we did because of the unprecedented pandemic, what we did was save the economy then, knowing we got some problems that we had now, and now we are recovering quicker and better than any other country on this planet as a result of your policies and the policies of Joe Biden.
The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Lucas, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Chairman Powell, thank you for testifying today. When you were before this committee a year ago, I cautioned against raising capital requirements on commodity derivatives that our agricultural and energy producers use back home to keep prices of food and power stable for consumers. At the time, you said that was a very specific concern and you weren't sure the proposal would even address commodity derivatives. And in fairness, that was before the Boswell proposal was officially published. Unfortunately, we now know that the proposal does impact commodity derivatives, and in fact, they are among the most penalized financial products that banks offer. And I would note for just a moment, I very much appreciate your comments and responses to Chairman McHenry about the nature of the overall proposal. Congress wanted end users to be able to secure their hedges without posting margin to keep the derivatives markets affordable. But I've seen estimates that some of these types of transactions for end users could face 10 times the capital requirement. Chairman Powell, make me feel a little better. Ease my concerns here. Will you and the Fed work to fix this?
Let me start by saying I want to echo the fact that our commodity markets and our capital markets are a huge national asset, and we need them to be functioning well and with as little friction as possible. I now understand that what you're referring to is the things that were done to increase capital requirements for various kinds of derivative activities. And I'll just say that's an area we're aware of the concerns, and it's an area that we're taking a very close look at.
I appreciate that. I was a member of the Dodd-Frank Conference Committee, where there was bipartisan support to not disadvantage end users, farmers, ranchers, small businesses. This had broad bipartisan support then and still does today. Unfortunately, the Fed could undermine this longstanding work done by Congress. I'd like to enter a few letters into the record, Mr. Chairman, that discuss the detrimental impact to end users. First, a joint Agricultural Trade Association letter from the American Farm Bureau Federation, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, among 7 others. Next, a joint Energy Trade Association letter from the American Gas Association and 4 others. And lastly, a letter from the American Public Power Association and the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Powell, I'd now like to focus on how the proposal is set to significantly disincentivize banks from offering clearing services. In Dodd-Frank, Congress mandated central clearing as a way to reduce risk in the system. The number of banks that can clear derivatives for end users has reduced over time, making it harder for end users to find a bank to offer this service. There are some estimates that the Fed's proposal will increase capital for this activity by 80%. I'm worried that this will make it even harder for end users to find a bank to clear their hedges. This also comes at a time when the SEC, our friends at the Securities and Exchange Commission, has just finalized a rule in December that will increase clearing in cost in Treasury markets. This will have a real impact on market access and liquidity, not just in commodities, but the $26 trillion Treasury market that plays a critical role in the world economy. Will you work with the CFTC to address this problem?
Again, I'll say that we're aware of those concerns, and we're prepared to work with other agencies and also to make sure that our capital proposal appropriately addresses them.
The strength of central clearing is entirely dependent on banks' willingness to participate, and problems with the Boswell endgame warrant a full reproposal to give us time to appreciate their consequences. And there are real consequences, as you and I both know, Mr. Chairman. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome again, Mr. Powell. It's an honor to have you before us today. I always enjoy hearing your commentary. As you know, recession and inflation, these are buzzwords, and they are used in some circumstances to cast a dim light on perhaps the Fed and others who are working to end some of these troubling circumstances we're dealing with. Are you now at a point where you believe that there will not be a recession? There was much talk about recession, and many people worried that we would find ourselves having to negotiate our way out of a recession. What is your position currently on a recession?
So U.S. growth last year was in excess of 3%. What we're seeing so far this year is continued solid growth. My expectation, and that of other forecasters and of my colleagues, is that we'll see continued growth at a solid pace. I will say, so there's no evidence or no reason to think that the U.S. economy is in or in some kind of short-term risk of falling into recession. Having said that, though, there's always a possibility, a meaningful possibility that an economy will fall into recession. I don't think that possibility, though, is elevated at the current time.
Thank you. I appreciate your saying this because we want to, at some point, eliminate the great deal of fear associated with just the term recession. Next point, the December FOMC projections showcase a slightly lower unemployment rate than last June's projections and slightly higher GDP, suggesting a soft landing remains likely. Are you of the opinion that we're headed to a soft landing, Mr. Powell?
I'll just say that what we've seen so far is an economy that's growing at a solid pace. We're seeing a labor market that is still tight, still strong. Wages are moving up, but the labor market's coming into better balance between supply and demand. And inflation has come down sharply, really, since the middle of last year. So those are the conditions we see. They're very attractive conditions, and we're trying to use our policies to keep that growth going and to keep that labor market strong while also achieving further progress on inflation. That's our goal. And do I think there's a possibility we can achieve all of that while keeping the labor market strong and the economy growing? Yes, I think there is a possibility. Indeed, that is what we're trying to achieve.
A soft landing can be difficult to identify. We could possibly have a soft landing and miss the point at which the landing took place. How do you define the soft landing such that a member of the public, a layperson, would understand that we have indeed had a soft landing?
So we really think about it in the terms I just discussed, which is we want to keep the economy growing, we want the labor market to remain strong. 3.7% unemployment is pretty near 50-year historical lows. And we want inflation to continue to move down closer and closer to that 2% objective. And we've made quite good progress on that over just the past year. So we want to continue those conditions. And I don't want to put the label on it. Other people can do that. But I would just say we're using our tools to keep a strong labor market and strong growth while making further progress on getting inflation down to 2% for the benefit of the public. That's the economy that we're trying to achieve, and I think there's we're on a good path so far to be able to get there.
Well, I concur, but I would ask this as my last question. Will there be some announcement at some point that we've had a soft landing? Because we have people who are continually indicating that we're not having a soft landing, there's a possibility of a recession. So will there ever be some official statement that would give people some comfort?
I don't think by us, no. I think we're just going to keep our heads down and do our jobs and try to deliver what the public is expecting from us. We wouldn't be declaring victory like that, but
The gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
thank
The
you.
gentleman from Texas, Mr. Sessions, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Chairman, welcome back. I think we enjoy this. I hope you do too. I know there's some bit of trepidation about all the things that are available to us and you to answer. I learned a long time ago on a campaign trail, every problem can be solved on a campaign. Reality's a little bit different. Welcome back despite all that. Looking at the Monetary Policy Report, March 1st, 2024. And as I review this, I would like to focus on the term that I would say high prices are here to stay. Because what I've heard you say today in this report really go to is you got everything under control, but we're going to keep the high prices. And I think the high prices really take a toll on the American people, as you're hearing from our colleagues, no matter whether they be Republican or Democrat. Page 7 of your report, you don't have to go focus on it, says, while current services, core service price inflation has been slowing, but remains elevated. It does. Labor costs, as you know, and energy costs are a driver to your monetary policy. The question that I have is, because you began referencing policy, 2 weeks ago or so, the president announced that he was going to slow down the gifting of opportunities in Texas for natural gas to be able to continue the exploration. And this in Texas is a $1 trillion answer problem to us, because if we do not constantly go find through these new finds, but also through the permitting process, we're in trouble. But we're also putting in trouble our contracts that we have with Germany and a lot of other countries. This is going to mean also that business in America continues to have high prices because, as you know, wages are already high and now energy is high. There's no resiliency to continue this and see the American people win. You talked about policy, so what's your advice to policy about energy and what this administration is doing on a policy perspective?
We have, broad, significant, important responsibilities, but we're really not responsible for energy policy, and we try to avoid commenting on.
But it has a huge impact on this report. It arbitrarily keeps prices high. It arbitrarily means that business is not, while they're making money, and while households, people do buy that, it's diminishing their long-term advantages to make progress. So you're just going to leave that alone?
Really not appropriate for us to comment. On if I'm commenting on energy policy, I should comment on everything. We have a mandate which is maximum employment and price stability. We take decisions by the legislature and by the administration as a given. We're not in charge of second guessing them. It's just not our job.
Okay, well, all right, let's say we're not going to second guess them. I will. I believe that the energy policies that this president and the Democratic Party have supported are causing a huge boom in prices staying high. They will not come down. A boom in attacking the energy industry, jobs that are associated with it, our foreign policy as it relates to contracts that we have signed with foreign countries, giving up the natural gas market almost entirely on a world market to Qatar. It has a huge impact on whether we are going to keep prices high or control these prices. It has a huge impact on, I think, your monetary report about how many houses get built, how many jobs get filled, whether we have jobs in place, whether we continue to have more jobs available than workers that are there, because over-regulation is having a lot to do with the nervousness not only on this panel, but also by the American people. It would be my hope that you would pass some sort of a memo and tell them you have no opinion, but you want them to see what the impact is. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Himes, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman Powell, thanks for being with us today. I have a question, but I want to start by acknowledging, not celebrating, but acknowledging what has been a really remarkable soft landing in our economy. And I'm not celebrating because the American people, consumers, are still feeling the effects of high prices. Wages haven't caught up with prices in some instances. But I think that it would be fair to say that observers would never have predicted the conduct of this economy. You yourself said it in the final press conference of 2023 when you said a very high proportion of forecasters predicted very weak growth or a recession. Not only did that not happen, we actually had a very strong year. So I want to acknowledge that and acknowledge your commitment to independent monetary policy. And because I'm still burdened with this idea that truth and facts matter, I want to point out, especially having listened to my good friend Mr. Sessions talk about the energy market, truth and facts matter. We are producing more oil and natural gas today than any other country on the planet. We are the world's #1 energy producer. I could spend my entire 5 minutes sort of pointing out facts. The fact I want to point out here, and this comes right out of the report, is that the premise that inflation is Joe Biden's fault, is fiscal policy's fault, first is faulty because half the fiscal stimulus that occurred in the face of the pandemic happened under the previous president, Donald Trump, and it has faded, and this report makes the case. Core, and I quote from it, core goods prices have been declining as supply bottlenecks ease and import price inflation falls. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't want you to comment on that because it gets a little bit political, but I do think it's important that we keep some foot on the plane of facts. I do want to ask you a question, though, Mr. Chairman, because I always worry about risks that we see and risks that we don't see. And I want to use the remainder of my time to talk about a risk you're very conscious of, which is the overhang in the commercial real estate market. As you know, the Financial Stability Oversight Council identified commercial real estate as perhaps the most salient risk to the financial system, $6 trillion roughly in loans, half of that on bank balance sheets. In a 60 Minutes interview a few weeks ago, you characterized distress in the commercial real estate market as sizable but manageable. Do you still feel like that risk is manageable? Do you feel like you've got the visibility and the transparency and the tools to address it? It makes me nervous because this has echoes of 2008, 2009, when vacancy rates were declined relatively rapidly. We're not seeing that right now. So how do you feel? Does that risk continue to be manageable, and do you have the tools to manage it?
Yeah, I would say yes to that. I think it is manageable, and we've been working hard to management for some time now, really. And what it really is it's a lot of downtown real estate where there's too much office supply because of work from home, and also the kind of downtown retail that is no longer as profitable, and things like that are really at the heart of it. So what we've done is we've looked at banks that have significant concentrations, and we've been in touch with them to make sure that they have a plan to deal with that. There will be losses by some banks. It isn't really the big banks, it's really medium and small-sized banks that have these higher concentrations. It's going to be with us as a problem we'll be working through, I think, for several years. And the idea is you've got to have enough capital, enough liquidity, and a plan to take the losses that you're probably going to take. And so that's what we're doing. We're very active in this space with small, medium-sized
So let me ask
banks.
you about that. Sorry to interrupt, but let me ask you about that. Silicon Valley Bank, wild irresponsibility inside the bank, egregious irresponsibility on the part of corporate treasurers who put so much on deposit. The Fed also had some self-examination to do because the examiners and the supervisors of the bank, quite frankly, were not doing what they should have been. So we might be forgiven for being a bit skeptical of claims of being on this. What has changed in the context of Silicon Valley Bank that gives you the confidence that the supervisors and the examiners will be on top of this?
I see it with my own eyes, but frankly, there's a risk that we would overreact to something as significant as that. It's not like we wouldn't have reacted very, very strongly to what happened with Silicon Valley Bank, and we have. So I know that our supervisors are out there, and we're hearing back from media reports that we have been engaged with medium and small-sized banks principally on this. So I am confident that we're doing the right things there, and I do believe it's a manageable problem. If that changes, then I'll say so.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Lukemeyer, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Powell, for being here today. I'd like to associate my remarks, or myself, with Mr. Hill's remarks earlier with regards to FDIC proposed long-term debt requirements that are based on the risk weighting of assets. I think it's an ill-thought-out proposal, and hopefully your position on FSOC, you'll be able to advise them and hopefully guide them that this is going to be held up until we actually get a Basel III rule. In October 2023, the board issued a proposal to update the debit interchange fee cap and regulation II. This is very concerning, given the data from both the GAO and Fed's own studies show that Reg II has significantly harmed access to free checking and other banking services for the country's poorest citizens. Yesterday, I introduced the Secure Payments Act, which would prohibit a final rulemaking until the Fed, among other things, studies the impact of the board's proposed rule, completes a quantitative impact analysis specifically as it relates to affordable banking services for low-income Americans, and reports those findings to Congress. I understand the Fed acted here because you feel you're facing litigation, but I urge the board to proceed with extreme caution with any type of price control proposals, especially since the first iteration was so clearly harmful. Chairman Powell, knowing of the hardship caused by this policy on low-income consumers, does it give you any pause to continue down this road?
As you know, this rule is out for comment. We extended the comment period to May 12, so we don't have all the comments yet. We'll evaluate them carefully and make an assessment. I mean, the law does assign us a specific job, which is to assess whether an interchange fee received by a large debit issuer for processing a debit card transaction is reasonable and proportional to issuer costs. This is the obligation that Congress has bestowed upon us. Not something we thought we sought, but that's our obligation under the law, and we don't know what else to do than to keep doing it for as long as that's our assignment. That's all we think we're doing, but I think that the concerns that have been raised will be things that we...
Well, hopefully you'll study this and understand that from the previous types of rules along this line, they were very detrimental to a lot of low-income, middle-income folks. As you know, the price reductions that were promised during the Durbin Amendment, for instance, the added profits actually went to the largest retailers rather than go to the consumers as they were talked about. 98% was one of the studies that showed that the retailers kept all the money instead of lowering prices as they were telling us that were going to happen. So I'm very concerned about that. So what's the legal basis for updating your regulation? You've talked about it a little bit. You believe that there is something in the law that says that you need to be doing this updating all the time, or should you be studying it before you actually propose a rule and make all these things more appropriate?
Well, again, I think our reading of the law is that it's not something you do once and leave it there. It's supposed to be reasonable and proportional to certain identified issue or costs. The implication being there, if those costs change, then this should change. So that's our reading. I think we do a lot of work. We waited a long time to change it. It's been many years since we did change it, but we do quite a bit of work to make this assessment, and we'll review the comments and the data that we get.
One of the things I hope that you consider is the fact that even though it's supposed to be on $10 billion and up, stuff all rolls downhill, and as the last study showed, the smaller banks, the community banks, are also feeling effects of this. So be sure and consider that when you start talking and thinking about this. I appreciate that. One of the things, yesterday I had two different foreign banker CEOs in my office, and one of them brought up the subject to me, which is very concerning with regards to artificial intelligence being able to impact financial institutions in this country and our banking system. And I tell people, I said, think about this for a second. You find some individual who is a well-known individual, perhaps Larry Kudlow, Dave Ramsey, Bloomberg, somebody who has got credibility, and suddenly you see an artificially produced advertisement or Facebook post, and this person says, look here, we've got 100 banks that have got a problem today. Now, that individual didn't do this. It's artificially produced. I've seen a commercial already with individual. You couldn't tell the difference between that individual and the real thing. We have just come through the Silicon Valley situation. And if you have real-time payments, FedNow, where you can instantaneously transfer money, and you have people scared to death by some well-known individual through an artificial intelligence situation, and I can tell you that China is watching this like a hawk. They are ready to pounce on this situation. To me, I've got some bills that actually would solve the problem. Do you think there's some issues here we need to be taking a look at?
Yeah, I think we're very focused on AI, many government agencies and law enforcement agencies in particular. It's very challenging. You paint one picture, there are lots of pictures.
Gentleman's time has expired.
It's interesting
now
because the
very
foreign
Gentleman's
banks
time's
actually are watching
expired.
this. Thank you.
We'll now go to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Garcia, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman Powell, thank you for being with us this morning. It's always a delight to have you before us. Chair Powell, the February Congressional Budget Office report estimated that the U.S. economy will grow an estimated $7 trillion over the next decade, thanks to, in large part, to the surge in immigration, creating a larger labor force. Immigration also increases demand for goods and services. I know you mentioned in your report that that the growth sometime during COVID was held down due to some restrictions in COVID and restrictions on immigration. Can you detail how immigrants have been fueling our national growth, and did you consider this report from the CBO in this current report?
So I am very familiar with the CBO report. I've read the demographic projections and I've read the economic projections, so I do understand what they did. And
So you do agree with a $7 trillion growth in the next decade?
I have no judgment on that. I haven't tried to make a parallel assessment, but I'm familiar with the assessment. What they're doing is they're saying more people working, bigger economy. And it makes the economy bigger. It's just arithmetic. If you say that if you add a couple million people to an economy, and a percentage of them will work, then there will be more output, and that's what they're showing. I just want to be very, very clear, though, that we don't make immigration policy. We don't comment on immigration policy indirectly or directly.
No, well, I'm not asking you to do that, but, Mr. Chairman, I'm simply asking if you agree that the immigration surge has added to our strong labor force, which is necessary. I think you said that we expect a continued growth at a solid pace. So to be able to continue on a solid pace, then we need that labor force. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, so last year we got a big increase in workers, and it came from two sources. One was participation increased from people who were already here, and in addition, we got a significant increase in immigration, and many of those people take part in the working economy, and so there was a big increase in labor supply. That will have increased output. It will have made more people. It will have all kinds of economic effects. I'm just reporting the facts there.
Right.
I'm not going to say anything is needed for the future or good policy or indirectly or directly, but I mean, I think it's just reporting the facts to say that immigration and labor force participation both contributed to the very strong economic output growth that we had last year.
Right. Is it possible for the Fed to conduct a formal assessment into the positive impact immigrants have on our economy and report back to Congress?
Not really, no. I think that's a job for the CBO. We don't. That's precisely what the Congressional Budget Office does, not what we do.
All right, but the other question that you've not addressed is, did you consider the CBO's assessment that the growth in the next 10 years would be $7 trillion and about $1 trillion in added revenues? Was that considered in this report? Because that was the February report, and this, I believe, is through February 29th.
So I think that the answer to your question is 10-year growth projections by CBO don't have big implications. They don't have any implications really for the current stance of monetary policy. But I will say that the immigration that we saw was a notable factor of the 2023 and 2024 economic outcomes. And of course, we're aware of that, and it plays a role in our thinking about appropriate policy and the path of the economy.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And related to that, I know that the last time that you were here, you and I talked about diversity and diversity and inclusion efforts, both at the Fed, and I applauded you and applauded the president for his appointment of Dr. Adriana Kubler. I expect to visit with her this week. What other strategies and programs are you using in the Fed, not only in here, but in all the branches to ensure that there is diversity and inclusion?
So in terms of intake of people, when we go to hire when the reserve banks go to hire a new president, those processes are very focused on having a diverse applicant pool, and you see the results of that more and more over the years. That happens. We don't have any role in appointments of governors, so that's not our job. The administration does that.
Gentlelady's
In terms
time's
of,
expired.
I'll just say internally, we're very focused on having an open and inclusive place to work. And also in hiring, we work hard to have diverse.
Gentlelady's time's
Thank you.
expired. The
Thank you, Mr.
gentleman from
Chairman.
Michigan, Mr. Heising, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Powell, good to see you in person. Mr. Chairman, I've got to make a comment here. It's stunning to me that equating an underground economy, which is very different and not a healthy alternative to the regular economy, and basing that on an illegal workforce that's not legally able to work, ultimately will fail. That is not a strategy to my colleagues on the other side. So just ask any farmer who's going to then have a regulator come in and fine them for employing people who are not legally allowed to be here in the country. That is one of their greatest fears. So that's just a fallacy of growth within this economy that is not sustainable. Chair Powell, last fall I sent Vice Chairman Barr a letter expressing my concern over the cumulative impact pending rulemakings governing products and services will have on consumers. This morning, there's been a fair amount of time spent on Basel III, but among the agencies, and here I'm including Fed, FDIC, OCC, CFPB, and the number of pending or final rules is frankly just staggering. Regulators last year finalized new rules for the Community Reinvestment Act. The Fed is also looking at Reg II, which in my opinion would unintentionally undermine recent significant progress in bringing low and moderate income consumers into the mainstream banking system. And just yesterday, the CFPB unveiled a rule that would cap late fees for banks. And I just literally walked out of a meeting with my credit unions who are very concerned about those things that may be in their future as well. So I think it's critical that we don't look at any of these rules in a vacuum, and we need to consider their total impact and full scope on that. So I'm going to ask you a question I've asked some of the other regulators. How much do you, as the Fed, and you personally, consult with other agencies on their own rulemaking agenda? Do you coordinate? Do you talk?
So I don't lead that area of our business, but I know there's a lot of talking. Coordination, I'm not sure there is coordination.
We're in government. There's always a lot of talking. I'm
much
concerned
talking.
about the coordinating. All right, well, let me ask you this way. When a rule is finalized under another regulator, are you mandated or have any kind of policy to go back and look at your other pending rules under your purview and see if changes need to be made because of these other agencies' rule makings?
There's no mandate like that. I think where it made sense to do that, though, we would do it.
But you genuinely have some sort of review of that. It's conscious.
I don't think there is a formal review of
Okay.
it, no.
I've heard repeatedly that elements of Basel III overlap with the Fed's annual stress tests. What are you going to do to address that overlap?
So we're in the middle of just at the beginning, actually, of deciding what to do about Basel III. And part of that may be the interaction with the stress test. So I haven't got anything for you on that today, but that's certainly an issue that presents itself.
We'd like to continue that conversation. I do want to touch on the bank failures of last year very quickly. Do you think that the banks that ultimately needed the government bailout lacked sufficient capital, or was it more of a management problem?
So with Silicon Valley Bank, it wasn't really, could they have used more capital? I mean, they were actually raising capital. It was a capital raise that they announced that triggered the run and everything. So you can argue that it needed more capital, but I wouldn't say that that was the proximate cause, really. It was a funding structure that was all about too much concentration of
Well, many of us are, I'm asking the question because many of us are very concerned that those failures are being used as an excuse to raise capital standards across the board. And because the SEC just released its climate disclosure rule this morning, I'm going to touch on the climate-related question for you. FSOC, the FSOC chair has repeatedly stated that climate change is, quote, an existential threat. Presumably a threat that is existential affects banks and financial institutions of all sizes. Why then have FSOC member regulatory agencies, including the Fed, limited their guidance on climate-related risks only to large financial institutions? Why not everybody?
Well, it's a new thing, and we are not.
It's a heck of a new thing, yes.
We're not climate change policymakers. It's this is
Neither is
something
the
that needs to
SEC,
be
I might
handled
add.
by elected representatives, and so we're starting this very carefully with large institutions who are already doing it. By the way, the things that we're doing, they're doing this because to remain active internationally, they have to be doing it. So we started with them because they understand it. Imposing it on smaller banks, it's not something I'm for.
Yep.
Gentleman's time has expired.
We'll
The
be
gentleman-
following up on the Taylor rule. So.
The gentlelady from Michigan is recognized for 5 minutes. Ms. Tlaib.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Thank you, Chair Powell, for being here. Do you agree with the April Federal Reserve report that compensation incentives contributed to Silicon Valley's bank failure?
I'm sorry, did I didn't
So the April Federal Reserve report, it said that compensation incentives contributed to the Silicon Valley bank's failure. Do you agree with that?
I would say it's at best a tertiary factor, but it probably had something to do with it. For me, not a major.
So that's no?
That's very small.
Okay, so it did, okay. So do you agree the appropriate rules on incentive compensation could have reduced the likelihood of Silicon Valley's failure? Maybe? If they didn't take all
No,
that
I
money?
really don't think so. I mean,
So if
I
they
don't
didn't
think
take all
it's
that money?
I don't think it's a first order question for Silicon Valley. A lot went wrong there.
Yeah.
Incentive comp would be
They actually
way
blame you
down the
guys.
list.
They
Sorry?
blame the oversight, even though they didn't respond to your
That's part of it.
correspondences.
We took our medicine.
Yeah. Do you think it also has something to do with the fact that Section 956 of the Dodd-Frank rule hasn't been finalized by you?
No, I don't.
You don't think it's the reason?
I don't.
You don't think it's because people made money off of the failure?
I think nothing.
You don't think money drove them to do what they did?
I didn't say that. What I said, there are lots
So
of.
they made money from it. They actually, it was a lottery for them,
I do not
right?
think that incentive compensation arrangements were at the heart of the Silicon Valley Bank failure. No.
Okay. Do you support a robust rulemaking for executive compensation, Chairman?
I know that the.
Oh, you don't?
I'm sorry?
Oh, that's simple. Do you support robust rulemaking for executive compensation? Do you believe in Section 956?
Section 956 is the law. As I understand it, the agencies are looking at doing something. It's been 12 or 13 years, right?
Yeah, multiple
Nothing
agencies.
has happened.
Yeah.
It's been hard to get it done. I lived through the last episodes of trying to get it done.
So do you believe in a robust
I
rulemaking
believe-
process for executive compensation?
I do, yeah.
Oh, great. Oh, that's awesome. Will you commit to helping finalize the Dodd-Frank section of 956 this year?
I wouldn't
It's been
say
12 years, Chairman.
Yeah, no, I want.
It played a role in the bank failure, Chairman.
If I can answer, what I would like to do is
So you don't want to do it this year? I mean, I'm being serious. You're saying no?
If the member will allow the witness to answer the question, we've had a good day today, and the gentleman's trying to answer the question.
I would like to understand the problem we're solving, and then I would like to see a proposal that addresses that problem.
Okay. Do you believe people should profit off of bank failure? The executives that made those decisions?
No, not the
They should not
executives.
profit.
Well, I would say executives who are responsible for a failed bank should not profit from the failure. Absolutely not.
So they get to walk away with compensation based on their failure?
Well, you're asking,
true, it
about a different rule that would have clawback and things like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something I know you've been looking at for a while.
Yeah.
That's certainly an appropriate thing to look at.
Yeah, because it's just going to continue to happen, is my opinion. It doesn't have to be yours, but it sure the heck could have helped here if they knew they were going to walk away, if they could walk away with not the bonuses, the compensation. I mean, they made money, a significant amount of money for their bank failure. Last question, Chair Powell. Do you believe that the impacts of climate change pose a risk? Have you been talking about that more?
I I certainly believe that climate change is real and poses risks over the longer term, sure.
So there have been some that say, you know, higher interest rates actually makes it more difficult to build out the renewable energy projects and other investments required to prevent climate impacts. Do you believe that to be true?
You know, it's not our, I believe that we need to do our job that you've assigned us, which is maximum employment and price stability, and we do it through interest rates. It's not our job to consider the effect on climate change of that, and I think any effect on climate change of that would be kind of minuscule.
Okay. Last question, Chair Powell, who do you see as the major winners and losers from high interest rates in terms of income groups, age groups, and racial or other demographics?
So the point of high interest rates in the current environment is to bring inflation under control. The people who are hurt the most by inflation, as you know, are people who are on a fixed income, who right away are in trouble when the cost of transportation, food, energy, and when those things go up, they don't have financial resources to deal with it.
Have you looked
We're
at the
accountable to provide price stability to the American people. Those people benefit the most over time from stable prices.
Gentlelady's time's expired. We'll go to the gentlelady from Missouri, Ms. Wagner, for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you, Chair Powell, for your service. I want to associate myself with the comments of my colleague, Mr. Himes. I am concerned about banks' commercial real estate exposure, and I do hope that the Fed is doing everything it can to ensure that the exposure that these banks have will continue to be, in your words, manageable, because this is a looming crisis out there, given the workplace changes and dynamics. Chair Powell, in remarks on Bloomberg, Larry Summers, former Treasury Secretary during the Obama administration, stated that, and I quote, "It would be much more productive for our central bank to be focused on the question of real estate portfolios in the banks they supervise than, quote, some of the more abstract and politically driven arguments about various kinds of capital charges on the largest banks." Do you agree, sir, that it would be more productive for Fed supervisors and regulators to keep their eye on the ball, in this case, commercial real estate and other real estate investments?
I absolutely think we need to keep our eye on the ball on commercial real estate, and you know, I think we're doing that.
I hope so. According to your semi-annual report, the median of members on your Monetary Policy Committee estimate that your target overnight interest rate will average 4.1% in 2024. Does that mean that the median number of members anticipate that you will be cutting interest rates sometime this year by as much or more than a full percentage point?
No, it doesn't mean that. Actually, the Summary of Economic Projections showed a median of, this is in the December FOMC, so this is now 3 months old, showed 3 rate cuts this year. So that would be 75 basis points, 3/4 of 1 percentage point. You were quoting the next year's number, so you would add that on. That was through 2025, I believe.
So are you anticipating that there would be more cuts here coming?
It's not, the way I would say it is, you know, we're making economic projections, and so we write down a path of growth, what's happening in the labor market, what happens with inflation, and what goes with those forecasts is an appropriate monetary policy, appropriate interest rates. So we expect inflation to come down, the economy to keep growing, the labor market to remain strong, and if that's the case, it will be appropriate for interest rates to come down, you know, significantly over the coming years.
Good.
What will really happen, though, it's not a plan. What will happen is actually what the economy needs. The economy will do something different from that, and that's what will actually happen.
Chairman Powell, 15 members of Congress, including myself, Ranking Member Sherman, Chairman Barr, and Ranking Member Foster, sent a letter to the prudential regulators regarding the impact that Basel will have on U.S. capital markets activities. The letter highlighted critical areas of our U.S. markets, including securities underwriting, securitization, and derivatives that will be severely impacted by the Basel proposal. This was also a common theme represented throughout the comment file on the Basel proposal, over 95% of them. Considering that 75% of financing in the U.S. is done through our capital markets, which are the deepest and most liquid in the world, Why would the Fed continue to pursue this flawed proposal instead of re-proposing a rule that would not have such a drastic impact on the U.S. economy?
Well, in fact, the capital markets concerns you raised are among those that I raised myself in our open board meeting when we put this out for comment.
You said you wanted broad support, and obviously there is dissent among some of your governors, the FDIC, others. So how are we coming on this, and how are we
we're working our way through the comments, and we're coming to the point where it'll be appropriate for us to begin to evaluate what changes are appropriate. I've said I think those changes will be broad and material, and that's where that is. But we haven't made any decisions yet. We just got the comments.
In my role as chairman of the Capital Markets Subcommittee, I have seen SEC Chair Gensler push the envelope in terms of rules and regulations that go well beyond the congressional mandate, even encroaching on the jurisdiction of other financial regulators. What is the Fed's response to another agency encroaching on its jurisdiction?
We do not comment on other agencies' regulation. However, if they were actually, to take your hypothetical at face value, if they were to come into our jurisdiction.
Oh, it's more than a hypothetical.
And we would react.
Good. Well, I hope you do. I yield back.
Gentlelady from New York, Ms. Velasquez is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right here.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for being here, Chairman Powell. Property insurance rates are becoming prohibitively expensive or inaccessible for homeowners and developers in my community. The FSOC's annual report identifies property insurance rates as an increasing risk, and I recently raised this issue with Secretary Yellen. Is the Fed monitoring the rising cost of insurance and its impact on macroeconomic?
Well, we'll pause the clock. You can have staff take a look at the microphone.
We need
the clock being frozen is out of respect for Ms. Velasquez, or out of good luck, I'm not sure.
The clock.
But we'll get staff to listen. We'll just suspend for a moment.
We need to invest in infrastructure for this committee.
Yes. Well, we're trying to do electronic voting, and
This is not voting.
no, it's hard enough to just get the microphones to work. Madam Clerk, thank you. Thanks. So all the photographers have left, so the awkward photos for Trish will be less awkward.
Okay, that's quite funny. So I'm not the only one who actually has technical issues, right? This is the US Senate or politics that are pretty much don't have a mic right now. So I'm not the only person who struggles with this. We can see Powell kind of fidgeting away. So kind of just behind me there. That's the only issue with some of these lives, right, would be the fact that in some cases I can take trades, but in most cases it is very hard to take a trade because the trades that are taken on a server, completely separate platform. Right? It's not on my desktop. It's on a secure platform, etc. So the issue remains is that a lot of times we will look at these sessions, especially when we're streaming, we've got to mute certain things, unmute certain things. It becomes very hard to kind of get that done. In the future for Premium Plus, we'll have dedicated trading sessions, which is less me talking and more as markets move. You guys can ask questions. We'll take some trades. We'll discuss what those trades are doing. We'll run trades into profits. We'll close off some trades. We'll have some losses from time to time, but we'll engage in more trading sessions, especially in the evenings. It's between 5, 6, 7 p.m. in the evenings. We'll spend some time together. And doesn't have to be anything crazy. We can just have music in the background. We'll look at some markets. You can ask some questions. We'll do some analysis. If you got a trade you like, we'll take it. We'll have some fun with it. So in the future, this is the kind of things we'll be doing. That'll be part of Premium Plus. So again, if you want part of Premium Plus, you definitely want to be one. In addition to that, guys, the like and subscribe button is down below. It's free. You can hit the like and subscribe button. Anytime we are publicly live, we don't do a lot of these broadcasts. Our formats are a little bit more structured than this. So if you want to hit the like and subscribe button, you'll never miss any time we are publicly live. But again, if you are Premium Plus, it's a private live session. Okay, so let's jump back into it.
Becoming prohibitively expensive or inaccessible for homeowners and developers in our community. The FSOC's annual report identifies property insurance rates as an increasing risk. And I recently raised this issue with Secretary Yellen. Is the Fed monitoring the rising cost of insurance and its impact on macroeconomy?
So yes, we are very much aware of increases in insurance, including property insurance, and it's been adding meaningfully to inflation. It's not something we have any control or authority over. Same is true of auto insurance. They're just insurance generally prices have gone up a lot.
So when we talk about the lack of affordability when it comes to housing, the insurance, the rising cost of insurance is an important factor that is affecting the availability of affordable housing in our communities. And I hope that there are some discussions among the Fed because it is an increasing risk and it's going to have a direct impact on our economy. Chairman Powell, I know you spoke with Chairman McHenry a little bit on inflation and interest rates. Can you explain what evidence you're looking for before inflation has returned to 2% and interest rates can be cut?
Sure. So we're not looking for inflation to go all the way down to 2%. That's not what we're looking for. What we want is just more evidence that will give us more confidence that inflation is on a path down to 2% sustainably. So that will come in the form of good inflation readings, really. We want to see, just a bit more evidence so that we can be confident. We don't want to have a situation where it turns out that the 6 months of good inflation data we had last year that didn't turn out to be an accurate signal of where underlying inflation is. So we're just being careful, and because the economy is so strong and the labor market's so strong, we think we can and should be careful as we approach that decision.
And when you say evidence, what evidence? If there's anything.
So just more, we'd like to see more good, relatively low inflation readings. We're not looking for better inflation readings than we've had. We're just looking for more of them. And what will happen is that as we go forward, the 12-month inflation will continue to drop because it'll be lower than early last year.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I would like to pick up on where Ms. Tlaib left off and reiterate the importance of the rulemaking on Section 956. This is an issue that I also raised with Vice Chair Barr, Chairman Grunberg, Acting Comptroller Sue, and I told them when they came before this committee that I will be asking for a status update on the rulemaking at every future hearing because it's well past time, 12, 13, 14 years. If you are employed in a company and you are given a task, I will think that you will be fired if you don't get it done, and it has taken 12 long years. So you are the chairman of the Fed. How is the Fed working with other agencies to propose the rule?
So there's a lot going on in regulation at the Fed right now. My understanding on 956 is that there have been discussions between the regulatory agencies, and I think it's not 3, I think it's more like 6 agencies that have to agree.
I know.
I have not seen a proposal. I think something is under consideration, but it's not something that's gotten to me yet.
I will ask the next time, and believe me, I'll be here.
Great.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Barr, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, good to see you. You have said numerous times that the capital framework is about right and that banks are well capitalized. Do you still believe this?
I do.
Given that you believe that, and given the fact that the Basel III Endgame proposal dramatically increases capital requirements on banks, would a reproposal that implemented Basel III in a capital neutral way, Could it do so without jeopardizing financial stability?
Could, I mean, hypothetically, yeah.
Okay. According to Latham and Watkins, 97% of the comment letters either opposed, called for a reproposal, or expressed substantial concerns about the Basel III Endgame proposal. And those negative comments came from across the ideological spectrum and from various interests. Without objection, I would ask the chair to include that report into the record. Without objection, I'd ask the chair to include that report.
Without objection.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, did you see that report?
I did.
Does that concern you, that 97% of the comments were negative?
So we didn't do our own count, so I can't make an assessment, but I would say it's unlike anything I've seen.
The Basel III comment period ended on the same day as the Fed's data collection on the proposal, which is an odd process since the data should have been collected far earlier, analyzed, and the results should have been available for the public to comment on before the comment period ended. Why did the Federal Reserve choose to do a quantitative impact study during the comment period for the proposal, foreclosing any ability by the public to comment on the results of the study?
Well, I mean, the movie's not over. We are where we are, and Vice Chair Barr did commit to putting the QIS out for comment. We will receive those comments, and those comments will be taken into consideration as we think about the path ahead.
Well, speaking of process, you've got your excellent general counsel right behind you there. And I don't want to get into privilege here, but have the lawyers at the Fed raised any process concerns or Administrative Procedure Act issues with the board?
Let me just say that we're committed to doing transparent and reasonable and data-based rulemaking in compliance with the Administrative Procedure Act.
Well, of course, giving the public the ability to comment on the quantitative data that has been provided obviously is consistent with good process. Sir, Governors Bowman and Waller, Vice Chair Hill, and Director McKernan all dissented on the proposal, and Vice Chair Jefferson expressed concerns with it during his statement. Under your tenure as chair, can you identify any other regulatory proposal which has elicited this much dissent?
No.
Have you in the past acknowledged in front of this committee that you will not move forward with proposals without consensus? Or you have acknowledged that in the past, and we appreciate that commitment to consensus. Have you achieved consensus yet on the Basel proposal?
Let me say I am confident that we will, but that's a process that as I mentioned, we're evaluating the comments. We're just coming to the place where we're going to start talking about the path ahead, and I am confident that we'll achieve very broad support on the board.
Mr. Chairman, do you agree that the heterogeneity and business model diversity within the banking sector contributes to system-wide financial stability?
I strongly do.
And do you agree that a concentrated business model in the banking sector would present a potentially systemic risk?
Potentially, yeah.
And this is one of my major concerns with the proposal, Mr. Chairman, because by de facto repealing regulatory tailoring, subjecting Category 3 and 4 regional banks to one-size-fits-all standards that currently only apply to large GSIBs, discouraging securitization, which is the private sector solution for dispersing risk, eliminating the use of internal risk models, and transitioning the industry and regulators toward only a standardized framework, actually would push the industry into a smaller and more concentrated-looking industry, and as a result would, in my view, actually increase systemic risk and decrease market competition. Do you share that concern?
I think it's a real concern. And again, I think that's part of what goes into my thinking, certainly, about the proposal and where it needs to go.
Well, given all of these concerns, we hope that you can commit to reproposing the Basel III Endgame, and we strongly urge you to take that into consideration. With that, Mr. Chairman, I
Gentleman from
appreciate the
Massachusetts,
time.
Mr. Lynch, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. Good to see you again. I want to go a little deeper into the commercial real estate issue and the potential impact on regional banks. This morning, Scott Rector, who's a member of the New York Fed Board of Directors, released a white paper on CNBC this morning describing the trillions of dollars in commercial real estate loans that will come due over the next couple of years. He described it as a, quote, slow-moving train wreck, close quote, and for our regional banks. He went on to predict that it will force a little over 500 banks, thereabouts, to either fail or consolidate. He also described what he termed as a doom loop where, similar to Silicon Valley Bank, when people lose confidence, when depositors lose confidence in the bank, they pull their money out and we end up in a bad situation. Now, I don't believe everything that I read or hear, but in Congress we do tend to repeat it. And I just wanted to get a sense from you. I am seeing in my own city of Boston, we've got.
Okay, guys, so I'm sort of summarizing and listening to a lot of the things that I've heard and the things that have obviously come up over the last little bit, and I can't actually think of any one particular thing we haven't heard yet be discussed, right? We've had questions about interest rate cuts. We've had questions about the Fed's current plan towards a 2% objective. We've had questions with regards to how soon would the interest rate cuts come into play. And I broadly believe we're seeing a very dovish Powell, right? He's being very patient. I mean, you guys are hearing this guy get grilled. He's not snapping back. He's avoiding any political answers. Remember, the Fed's mandate is price stability over everything, right? A good, healthy workforce and price stability. That's the Fed's mandate. That's what they're allowed to focus. That's what they're supposed to be focusing on. So he's staying away from any other question or answer that deviates from that. I'm hearing a fairly dovish Powell, right? And that sets us up for quite a few interesting things that we're going to be diving into quite seriously from tomorrow. So let's just have a look at this, right? So US 30s responded beautifully, right? Start just before the speech, we got obviously a little bit of a spike, a little bit of a pullback. Start of the speech, we've seen mostly bullish activity across the board. Gold, same thing. We've broken out of that previous high now. I noted this while the speech was busy happening. If you go to a daily, right, that monster spike that we got in December, I believe that was the NFP or CPI data point, the 4th of December, that $2,142 to an ounce of gold was that spike high. I've noted that spike high in the current gold pricing, and we're coming back to find support there on that level there, right? That $2,142 to an ounce of gold, a significant level, right? Again, we've made that attempt to that next level. I'm going to be looking for both from the copy trade as well as the signals. We're probably going to run out of time for the signal side. Remember, that's the beauty of copy trade. It happens anytime, right? Signals will only send from 12 o'clock midday until 8 p.m. in the evening. This might happen at 11 o'clock this evening, might happen at 1 a.m. in the morning, might happen 5 a.m. tomorrow. So I'm going to be looking for opportunities, both from a long perspective and a potential breakdown in structure on gold. US 30 giving us great positive bull momentum, as I mentioned. I just drew out a lot of the times what my prediction is going to be to just save a bit of time and not have to speak about it while we're live. But US 30 is currently a 5-minute time frame. We did break out into that new high zone, made a little push there for about 1,400 pips. But again, on the copy trade for today, we already met our goal, right? We're up 10% for the day, 5% overall, right, over our original capital goals. So again, Monday we had, a bad hit. We had a very difficult day on Monday. We took a lot of hits, right? Even in those bad times. And Henry made a comment saying, he depleted his account, whatever the case may be. Even if you have a look at our copy trade, even on the worst of possible days where every trade we can possibly imagine goes wrong and market structures break across the board, we make sure that even on those worst days, we're not losing and decimating our accounts. We spoke about this very early on into the broadcast. Tuesday, yesterday, we recovered most of it. Today, we're in an absolute profit, right? So again, there's no reason to overtrade, right? We're already up across the board. If you're a copy trade client, go look at your accounts. You should be smiling there, right? So there's no reason to add risk for the day. There's always tomorrow. There's always Friday. There's all these new days, all these new opportunities day in, day out. That's how we do things. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities across the board. This new information we have received is not really new information whatsoever. He's keeping his pace, he's keeping his tone, and I think it's fairly obvious. The Fed's just basically saying this in summary, right? They're going to continue to look at the data. There's nothing wrong with keeping levels higher for longer. the current dot plot that we saw in January indicates that the Fed will be cutting up to 75 basis points, right? So 3.25% basis point cuts over the course of 2024. So they've got 3 meetings, 3 months to cut rates. That was the original forecast. Do I think we're going to start to see a cut in May? Yes, right? I think May, June, we're going to start to see that first rate cut. And as that gets debated, as we start to see this being discussed, markets will start to realize this, and we'll start to see a bit of an uptick, more activity on indices, commodities, etc. across the board. So we're going to start to see a weakening of the dollar. We're going to see some massive opportunities across the board. So there's never been a better time to get into trading. If you haven't yet done so already, jump in. Our free academy has got some stuff to get you going. Quantum Growth and our Premium Plus, it's an absolute no-brainer, less than $1 a day. You need it. It's just a necessity. If you want to be in the space, if you want to take trading seriously, ignore these Instagram retards. They don't know what they're doing. They're selling rubbish and robots. Just ignore them, right? Get to know how trading really works, right? Unless someone can come on and trade live and speak about markets, predict and analyze and break it down, they're not a trader, right? They're guessing. If you only see these people on NFP guessing directions, CPI, before the data comes out saying buy now, boom, blow, just call them a retard, block them and move on with your day. You'll be saving yourself a bunch of pain. So we do have NFP with this Friday. I generally don't like NFP. I generally don't like these weird news events. They're for information purposes only. We make, if an NFP moves 2,000 pips, we make more than that in a day just by general trading. Why would we want to go into a high risk event and gamble, right? Because that's really what it comes down to. And in addition to that, Fridays are just bad, right? Bad for trading. So we're going to be looking at a bunch of things. We've got some fundamental data coming out tomorrow. We have the second part of Powell's testimony tomorrow. That one I'll be listening to. I'll be streaming. I'll be doing it myself. I'll give you guys an update if you are on Premium Plus, right? Again, guys, I think we've hit our PIP target for the week for the free group. So only signals will be going to Premium Plus from this point moving forward, right? Premium Plus also gets indices, which the free group does not. So if you're not yet a part, you know what to do. I'll tell you, guys, listen, we've still got the flu. We're pretty tired. I'm going to sign out right now. But listen, I appreciate you as always. If you haven't yet done so already, hit the like, subscribe button, and I'll see you guys on the other side. You know the drill. Be safe, trade safe, and until I see you a little bit later. Goodbye.